Folks, welcome to Zimperium's fraud webinar. My name is Krishna Vishnabhatla, VP of Product Strategy. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to you all. I also have with me Mikhail Kemperman, who heads up sales engineering for us. Hey, Mikhail, how are you doing today?
Doing all right. How about yourself?
Good. No, it's fantastic. I mean, a topic that's been generating a lot of attention for us, as we know. But we wanted to spend a little bit of time today just talking about ways to reduce mobile fraud, right? As you all know, mobile has become the digital channel for a lot of enterprises and small businesses. So here's what we're going to cover over the next 25 minutes or so. We have significance of mobile. How pervasive is really mobile fraud? I know we hear about it. There's a lot of news around it, but then what is the real impact it's having on the industry? Why traditional approaches struggle. A lot of the customers we speak to are invested in fraud platforms, right? But they're still working with us as there are gaps. So they're looking for some help to identify what can they do, like where do you go from here? So we'll spend a little bit of time on that. Q&A, we have some time for Q&A at the end. If you do have questions, please post them in the chat. When we arrive at the Q&A session, we will walk through those questions and answer as many as we can. All right, let's get going. So we all know this is what our new bank looks like, right? You look at your mobile phone today, there'll be over 10% of your applications will be financial applications, right? I barely go and visit my physical bank. The only reason I go there is maybe because for a transfer, a certain transaction, they force me to come in. Else, your phone is your bank, right? You have, every day you look at how much money is in their account, you pay bills, and you transfer money, right? That is the essence of banking today, and we all do it on our mobile phones. And if we just look at the statistics, right, they should not surprise anyone. 3.4 billion mobile online banking users from 2024. People are already gravitating towards mobile pre-pandemic, but the pandemic has accelerated that. People want more self-service on their phone, and mobile apps are critical. 80% say primary way of banking. Why wouldn't we? It's just convenient. Fund transfers. We use our bank at least a month. We see people logging in at least once a day in certain sectors of the industry. So, you know, we cannot deny that mobile apps are the way we want to bank going forward. How do we choose how our bank is? I mean, if you guys think about it, right? If one of your banks said that, sorry, we don't support mobile apps, how likely are you to go with them? Right? You're not. Mikhail, I know you have an interesting story in terms of how you ended up choosing a bank. Why don't you enlighten us all?
Yeah, sure. So it's about a year ago, I moved countries and I moved back to the Netherlands, where I'm from originally. And I had, we wanted to buy a house, shopping for a mortgage. And there was like two banks that would offer the same package. And both were saying, you know what, if you want this extra discount on your mortgage, then you have to do your private banking with us as well, right? And given it's a mortgage that'll kind of sum up a significant amount. So I started looking at those mobile apps, and it basically drove me to one bank because one of those banks had horrible apps to work with. So I just didn't want to go down that path, right? So it was really kind of a deciding factor for me to give the business to the one bank and not the other.
Yeah, it makes sense. And it's interesting, if you see the research on the slide, is mobile banking has moved into top 3, while fraud prevention is still far out, right? Because convenience that mobile apps bring just is so undeniable, right? But, there is unmitigated risk, right? As much as we love mobile apps, we love our mobile phones, and we love using mobile banking apps, there's a lot of risk, because we as consumers understand the convenience, but so do cyber criminals, right? They understand as well that the way we want to bank is on our phone, right? Which explains their focus on mobile banking, 600%, including in app fraud transactions. Why? We all bank on our phone, right? The notion of fraud being occurring in the bank, in your call center, on your web app is yesterday's news, right? Cyber criminals understand that we are banking on our mobile app and we will continue to do so. So that's where they're focused. Mobile malware. This is a huge problem, right? Anytime if you go into Google and search for mobile malware, the statistics are stunning. Mobile malware authors spend 80% of their time now on mobile malware, right? Because it's worth the return of investment is there. Banking malware. This by itself is interesting because when people think malware, it's never clear whether it's a targeted attack or not. But with more and more banking targeted malware, cyber criminals have clearly understood and are targeting their techniques to banking malware. Mikhail, I know you've had done some interesting research on this
Mhm.
topic. Why don't you spend a
Yeah.
minute?
Yeah, so there's various strains of malware out there, and it's ever evolving. And the thing that we've observed over the last 24 months or so is that there is a significant increase of sophistication, if you will. So we see malware that specifically target banks, right, and specific apps from banks. But not just that, also start to apply measures to evade detection and evade users getting notified about malware being there. So if you look at something like BlackRock, some sample I researched myself, we could really see that this malware was really trying to hide away from the traditional antivirus solutions that might be on a mobile device today, right? So if your banking app is running there, the BlackRock comes on there. If it sees, let's say, an AV vendor on there, it'll actively try to kill or suppress that application from ever coming to the foreground and notifying the user that there is a malware there. Yeah? And that sophistication, is a significant change in the way the malware has been behaving recently.
Yeah, so that's a great point, right? Because the trend, if you just take a step back and look at the trends, we know that banking malware is on the rise, right? We're seeing more variants come out. But the other interesting part is they're also succeeding, right? It's not just malware authors are putting malware out there and the existing, antivirus are catching them. No, they're not. Mobile malware is actually succeeding because I think the cost of mobile malware is almost at a trillion right now,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah,
It's just
and to that point, getting your hands on a piece of mobile malware is actually quite simple. I know for one of the malware strains, the source was kind of open, right? It was delivered through a specific group, right? And they basically published the source for everybody to just grab and make their own variants off of it, which will kind of spin out of control, a lot of malware and infections in the wild.
yeah, no, absolutely. So we keep saying fraud, but let's spend a minute on where does the research suggest fraud is occurring, right? If you look into the slide, the interesting fact is the three categories, whether it's online, e-commerce, or logins, is you have a new account and a new device, trusted account and trusted device, and trusted account and new device. And you'll see that every time there is a new device, right? Those are the areas where fraud's really high. And it makes sense, right? Because from a banking institution or a financial services institution standpoint, you know nothing about the device, right? If you just think about it, when someone opens an account, you know very little about the user and the device. But there's several sources of information you can find out about the user, right? You can get their FICO score, you can do credit report, you can do a background check. There are a bunch of watch lists for customer screening. You can gather a lot of user credibility information. There's almost nothing that you know about the device. Mikhail, any thoughts on what we're seeing and what the research suggests?
Yeah, so if you sum it up, right, we did some math on it, and it's about 25% of the fraud comes from new devices. So if you're really not taking a good look at that device when you first encounter it, and also kind of continuously monitor the risk posture of a device, you're kind of opening yourself up as an organization to fraud. Yeah, full stop.
Yeah, no, great point, right? And this has been a recurring theme for us as we've worked with our customers, right? Because the question quickly boils down to is, how do you establish trust in a mobile device today, right? And we know this is hard, but when we engage with our customers, financial services institutions who are already invested in technologies, when they talk us through the challenge with mobile, it really boils down to this, right? How do we trust a device, right? That we don't own, we don't control, and the end user can pretty much do whatever he wants to do on it, right? That is the question to solve today's mobile fraud problem, right? And the more we think about it, is the the truth of the matter is that mobile device risk changes continuously, right? Because we are familiar with this.
Hmm.
When we look at our mobile device and how we use it, right, every hour, every day, it's not a surprise. But why don't you spend a minute kind of talk about some things that really change the posture of your device, right? This is not small stuff.
Sure, sure. So think about usage, right? If you use your mobile device normal, like a normal human being, you walk out on the street, you encounter different networks through the Wi-Fi, right? Every time you encounter a new network, potentially the risk posture of your device changes because there might be an attacker in the network. Even better, right? When you travel a lot, like we all used to do, but you go into the airport, the one day you were in the network, it's fine. The other day you're in the same network and there's an attacker in there as well, right? So simply based on the network, there's a lot of risk indicators that you can get. But also, app ownership changes a lot, right? You get an update from the app. Maybe the developer of the app has done something that exposes your device to a vulnerability, or maybe the ownership of the app's changed and now it's owned by this nefarious actor that's putting malware onto your device without you even knowing about it. And if you really take a step back and look at all the threat vectors associated with a mobile device, there's just so many of them. And trying to understand what's happening on all these vectors is extremely difficult and challenging. Definitely in the context of mobile, where the usage is so dynamic, right? So if you compare it to the traditional endpoint, right? You go to the coffee shop, you do your work, right? The moment you close your laptop and you stick it in your bag, everything's off, nothing's happening anymore. Your mobile phone is not like that at all. It continuously processes all kinds of stuff from all kinds of channels, and therefore exposes you, and the risk posture changes quite rigorously on a continuous basis, effectively.
That's a good point, Mikhail, right? There is no turning off your mobile device, right? I mean, I don't know how any of us would survive if we turned off our mobile phones. So even when you lock the screen, put it in your pocket, this device continues to download content onto the phone, update apps, connect to Wi-Fi networks that it's known before, and continue to process information, right? And I think that's the big difference when we think about mobile is we don't use it like a laptop, right? And it doesn't work like one, right? It has a mind of its own and it continues to process large amounts of information, even though we are not actively using it. That's why the device risk changes so much. So the notion then, so the question that we're trying to help with in terms of fraud and how do we better address fraud on mobile, right? And it really comes down to risk, right? If risk is changing continuously, is there a way for us to know what the risk posture of a device is at any point in time, right? That's the answer. Is if you could do that, that lends itself to several different things, right? If you knew a device was healthy, you would allow it to do a lot more. If you knew a device was unhealthy, you wouldn't allow it to do so much, right? So that's the question, right? If you want to start furthering your fraud detection and prevention, you have to find a way to know how risky a device is at any point in time, right?
The one thing I'll kind of note here as well is that device health is not as simple as just doing a jailbreak detection, okay, or root detection. It is far more sophisticated than that, given that that will simply tell you very rudimentary, deterministic, is there a binary on the file or has a change been made in the OS, right? It doesn't tell you anything about all the other sophisticated threat vectors that are associated with a mobile device. So device health or risk posture really is the combination of all these threat vectors and an assessment of that. Yeah.
Yeah, no, great point, Mikhail, right? We see when people say device health, right? A lot of initial investments have been made in just basic jail root or basic routing detection. The sophistication that we see in mobile malware is way past that, right? So it's you're right, you have to look beyond those things. The other things we're starting to see some companies do is use behavioral analytics. Things like, how do you hold your phone? Is your phone lying down flat on the floor? Am I holding it upright? In terms of using the sensors to kind of assess whether your phone's actively being used in a legit manner or not. These are okay. These are like pseudo indicators, but they don't really tell you how unhealthy or how risky it is your device is to allow a valid banking transaction, right? So let's say you do have this ability, right? And this is what we're helping customers with is we really help them assess the risk of a device at any point in time. And why is this so important to them, right? If you look at the areas why this matters, right, is because they look at device risk information as better decision making. And when they think of decision making, they're thinking in these four primary areas. On device visibility, which is I want to first know what is happening on the device that my app is running on, right? Second, they want to monitor transactions from unhealthy devices, right? The volume of transactions is so large that it's a hard problem to solve, right? You pick any of the fraud platforms out there, they have massive analytics engines because it's a lot of information to process. But if you knew certain amount of transactions were coming from a unhealthy or a risky device, that allows you to focus your time and energy there. Real-time prevention. If you knew it was an unhealthy device, wouldn't you do something different? And customer screening. What if you knew the customer at account opening had an unhealthy device, right? How would you flag him or how would you deal with that kind of customer? Would you let him know about his device? So the ability to derive risk has allows you to make better decisions in various areas. Mikhail, why don't we just spend a minute and kind of go through each one of these and give us your perspective on how you see customers actually using some of this stuff.
Sure. So the first one, right? The on-device visibility, sometimes referred to as kind of the emergency brake. Okay, with full visibility on security on the device and all the risk associated with it, you can identify certain conditions that would kind of exclude the device from allowing an app to run. Right, full stop. So think about devices that are compromised, not so much rooted or jailbroken, where an attacker has infiltrated into the OS and is taking control of it, okay? Or malware that is specifically targeting the particular app that's on there, right? Those are conditions where, as a customer of ours, we don't want your app to run because the risk is unacceptable. Yeah. Um, Now, once the app does run and you get visibility on all of those threat vectors, there's a lot of telemetry that can be gathered, and you can actually use that telemetry while you're monitoring transactions, right? Does the transaction come from a device that, kind of adheres to a number of risk condition things? Think about an unsecure network, combined with network interception attack, combined with, a non-targeted malware, combined with another thing, right? All those conditions together might lead to you wanting to flag an application or a transaction that it comes from an application that you feel you need to do more investigation, or simply you need to start a fraud case of some sort. Yeah. Once that feed of threat telemetry is properly consumed, we see our customers kind of adopt that into a decision-making platform that spans across the threat telemetry, including user behavior analytics, KYC data, and all of the good stuff that we have to dynamically feed back to an app on the device what kind of behavior it should allow, right? So If you know that your customer is in a country where the risk is higher, on a network where the risk is high, with a set of applications that you don't trust on its device, you might want to allow them into their app, but not give them the possibility to do certain things, make large transactions, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then finally, customer screening is really there when you're monitoring the transaction flow, and you put the threat telemetry that, with regard to those threat vectors against that. You can quickly pick out customers that are that are posing a potential risk to the organization, right? To further transactions. So you put them on a blacklist or a gray list, so that when they want to transact from whatever channel, their transactions are marked or blocked, so that you keep tabs on what these risky customers are doing.
Yeah, no, great point. Points, Mikhail. Folks, as you can see, right, it all comes back to, if you're able to assess the mobile device's risk at any point in time, right, you can then factor that into the decisions you're making, right? You can plug that information in to your existing fraud platforms and make better decisions. And decisions are, as you can see, across different areas. Now, these four, we've kind of highlighted these four, is our customers who are using our technology have gravitated to these four first, right? But as we continue to work with them, there'll be several other use cases where your ability to make better decisions will become profoundly better as you factor in real-time risk and threat telemetry trends over time. So how are our customers really using this, right? So here's a customer of ours. It's a global investment and consumer bank, 50 apps and over 50 million users, right? A very large mobile footprint. They use Actimize, Feedzai, right? The traditional fraud platforms. These platforms already are part of their fraud and financial crime strategy. But when they came and engaged us, it boiled down to the same problem, right? The existing fraud platforms work differently. They focus on transaction analytics, right? They all, to some extent, implicitly trust the customer transaction. But they understood that banking malware was the problem, right? They understood that the way banking malware was trending, that is what their exposure really was. So they worked with us. They leveraged and acquired our Z-Defend technology, embedded it into all their mobile apps to get a real-time risk assessment, right? Whenever someone used their app, opened their app would know exactly how risky that device, that network they were on, the apps that they had. The app knew whether it was running in a safe environment or not. And with that telemetry, they pass it on to their fraud and risk teams. And now they're starting to proactively limit what an end user or an employee, depending on what type of app it is, can really do on the device. Here are some examples, right? Transfer money limits. If they know your device has been compromised when you're trying to transfer money, they will not let you transfer beyond a certain limit, right? They'll also post a message on the phone saying, we don't believe this is a safe device. We recommend you do this transaction from another device. If they do, then they handle it accordingly. But they are always aware that a certain transaction happened on a compromised device. Bill pay, right? They'll restrict bill pay if your devices are in critical conditions. Investment banking apps. You might not be allowed to log on unsafe apps because the risk is way too high, right? And when they put our technology into their apps, here's some things they found. They had over 120,000, their app was running on over 120,000 compromised devices, right? That is, if you think about that for a second, 120,000 compromised devices were running their app, which means it's not good for their consumer and it's not good for them as an enterprise, that it might open them up for a breach. Over 2 million devices were vulnerable, meaning not have the latest security updates and not have the latest apps, were not updated, right? Trouble. Unsafe networks. People, we love our mobile devices and we love Wi-Fi, So people were connecting to unsafe networks. There were 18,000 malwares on these devices that their apps were dealing with, and they had no idea if this malware was exploiting their app, right? There were devices that did not come from official Google or Apple stores, and you have no way to protect or prevent these apps from exploiting your banking app, right? That's what they were starting to realize. Now, this use case that we're talking about is why large financial services organizations are working with us, especially in terms to fraud and financial crime strategies. They know that cyber criminals are going after apps, and they want us to make their app bulletproof so that their apps can't be exploited by things like mobile malware or a malicious actor on a mobile device. And that's where we're really starting to make some progress on beating mobile fraud. Let me just stop there. And any questions? Mikhail, do you see anything on the chat channel at all?
There's no open questions at this point.
Great. So folks, as you can see, we are actually actively helping our customers even today, right? There are large financial services organizations globally that have approached us to help, and we're working with them with their mobile app setup, with their mobile app lifecycle, and helping them build better apps. But we've talked about fraud as a certain use case, but really what we're helping our customers do is build safer and secure apps, which means you have to address some of these issues during development and runtime, right? During runtime, you have the ability, or the platform has the ability to identify security, privacy, and compliance gaps, fix them, right? Shielding. Make sure you have technology so that nobody can look inside and inspect your app and understand how to abuse your code to begin with, right? This is a huge deal for malware authors. So we're helping them harden their app. Last but not least, one of the most important pieces that we're helping them with is once you release your app into the wild, how do you make it defend itself from things like banking malware and anyone else that's trying to exploit the app? And from a fraud perspective, most of our customers have reached out because ZDefend, or what we call Run Secure, is where they are really see a gap, because traditional fraud platforms are focused on other things, right? The fraud platforms today are just not ingesting device risk posture data like what we're able to provide and help them make better decisions. So customers are starting to leverage our ZDefend product and factor that into their decision making. So where do you go from here? If you are in building a mobile app and you are worried about some form of fraud within your app, then please feel free to reach out to us. We are also doing free risk consultations for customers who are concerned about fraud on mobile, or if you want to learn more. Either way, just reach out at info@zimperium.com. If not, Mikhail and I are active on LinkedIn. You can find us and reach out to us, and we'll be absolutely happy to help you. Thank you. Mikhail, any last words?
Stay safe, address the risk.
All right, folks. Thank you so much for
Thanks.
attending the webinar, and we hope to talk to some of you soon. Thank you.